Hi, I'm Julie Woodward with the Oregon Forest Resources Institute. It's my pleasure to be your host for today's Tree School online webinar about choosing the right forestry professionals. We're excited you all can join us today. Tree School Online is a production of the OSU Forestry and Natural Resources Extension Program and the Partnership for Forestry Education. We want to give recognition to the Oregon Forest Resources Institute for contributing to this project and to the U.S. Forest Service and the Oregon Department of Forestry for providing a grant. The Tree School online webinars are offered every first and third Tuesday of the month through June of 2021. Also, there's another series of webinars being offered by the OSU Extension for Eastern Oregon Forest. Please visit the Tree School online page, knowyourforest.org website for updates and registration for both series. Many of you have probably joined us in the past for these series, and we appreciate that you keep returning and joining us for these conversations. Just a few housekeeping things to let you know about how these work. You probably have found your Zoom toolbar, often located on the bottom or top of your screen. And right now your audio and video is turned off for all participants. You'll just see the panelist. If you have questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A box. We'll be monitoring that throughout the webinar. We'll be answering questions at the very end of the presentations. If you have a question or a comment or something general, please put those in the chat, and Dan Stark will be helping monitor that today. We'll also have useful links and other things in the chat as we go along. We also will have resources, and hopefully you've gone to the Tree School Online class guide, and there's a whole list of resources that are available there you can download, or the links that we shared today will also be in the resource folder. This webinar is being recorded, and they'll be archived as a YouTube video and accessible from the Tree School Online pages. We also plan to have two polls today, and we're going to at the very beginning and at the end, and it should pop up. If not, you can hit the poll description, and we would just appreciate you answering those and giving us some of your feedback today. Disclaimer: if the views and opinions expressed by our speakers are theirs and theirs alone, and not those of OSU, OFRE, or the Partnership for Forestry Education. So I'm excited today to have Alicia Christensen and Eric Farm join us. They have a lot of experience about choosing the right forestry professionals, being forestry professionals, and a lot of resources to share today. And then we give you a little background on Eric to begin with. And Eric Farm is the owner of Farm Unlimited, a consulting forestry firm based in Coos County. And Eric has worked in the industry for over 17 years, and the last 5 as a consulting forester. He's a licensed professional engineer and a full member of the Association of Consulting Foresters. Eric is also a member of the Society of American Foresters, the Oregon Small Woodlands Association, and the Professional Engineers of Oregon. In his free time, he serves as the Vice President of the Oregon International Port of Coos Bay and volunteers at the Morgan Creek Fish Hatchery, a volunteer program that produces over 1 million fall Chinook each year. Prior to starting his forestry career, Eric served in the U.S. Army for over 4 years as an Army engineer officer and served overseas. Eric's company, Farm Unlimited, is certified with the state of Oregon as a minority and emerging business enterprise, and with the federal government as a veteran-owned small business. Him and his staff are assisting landowners of all sizes across Southwest Oregon, and their forestry projects have included timber harvesting, road construction, maintenance, timber cruising appraisal, reforestation, herbicide treatments, and fire resiliency projects. So he's going to share some of his behind-the-scenes stories today with us and some great tips. And Alicia Christensen is the OSU Extension Service Assistant Professor of Practice and Assistant Professor of Practice and Extension Forestry Agent in Douglas County, and where she's had almost 5 years there. She works with a wide variety of audiences, most often small woodland owners, to provide education and outreach for forestry and natural resource subjects. She's a member of the Society of American Foresters, the Association of Natural Resource Extension Professionals, the Oregon Small Woodlands Association, and the Oregon Wood and Timber. And prior to working at OSU Extension, she worked for a private timber company and forestry consulting firm in California. She's also worked for the U.S. Forest Service in Alaska. In her free time, Alicia enjoys exploring Oregon forests and managing a small woodland property with her husband, son, and dogs. And I appreciate, again, both of them being with us today. And Alicia is going to give us an overview about what we're going to hear today as part of their presentation.
All right, thank you, Julie. So good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today for this Tree School Online presentation. You are probably already familiar with a few different things that we've already covered in some tree school webinars. So when you're managing your woodland property, there are a variety of professionals that you might find yourself working with over the years. In previous tree school online sessions that we've had, we've introduced how landowners can work with technical service providers through USDA financial assistance programs. These are programs like the Emergency Forest Restoration Program, which is offered through the Farm Service Agency, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program offered through the Natural Resource Conservation Service. Those are two that you might be most familiar with. You might also be familiar with the free educational services in site visits that OSU Extension offers through your local Extension forestry agent, or possibly even a master woodland manager volunteer. And you might also have experience working with an Oregon Department of Forestry stewardship forester when preparing for and following a timber harvest. Well, today we are going to introduce you to what all of these services we're going to cover what all these services have in common, or we're going to cover what that missing piece of that puzzle is. So all of these services have in common that they're state and federal agencies that offer technical, financial, and educational assistance. And this missing piece that I haven't talked about are the private forestry professionals. So these are private companies that you're going to hire to help you accomplish a variety of goals on your land. That could be things such as administering forest management activities, harvesting timber, planting trees, applying herbicide, or filing taxes. So today we're going to cover what different types of forestry professionals or contractors you might consider working with over the years, and some helpful tips for doing so. So I'm going to jump back over to Julie, who's going to share a poll with everybody, and we'd love for everyone to participate.
Thanks, Alicia. Yep. So as we're getting started, that poll should have started. We're just asking a couple questions. Where are you from? A little bit about yourself, and then how many acres of forest land do you own or manage, if any? And then we've added one for today. Do you have any upcoming forestry projects planned for the property you own or manage? And thinking about, and maybe by the year end, if there's any projects that you're thinking you're going to use forestry professionals, or maybe you're even doing them yourselves, but some of those projects you might have coming up. So we'll just take less than a minute here and appreciate everybody that's here with us today. We have 75 people signed up for the webinar, and it looks like we're loading in quite a few if you're still joining us. So appreciate, we know we're getting that sunny weather here in Oregon, at least today, which is always harder to spend inside and watch webinar, but really appreciate, this is a really important topic for a lot of landowners, and especially as you're thinking about some of those important projects that you might have coming up. So it looks like we have a little over half of you have voted, and we have some good results coming in. I'll just give another few seconds here so those last few votes can help get in. And looks like the majority of people today are from the Willamette Valley. We do have, as mentioned, Eric's from the coast and Dan's from the coast. So we have some coastal and some southwest and central. And then we even have people from around the US, they're saying. So let me share the results of these, and people can hear all, and you can see this. So you can see that we have folks from all over Oregon and even at Washington and in the US. And it looks like the majority of our viewers today are woodland owners. We also have natural resource professionals and agency professionals and nonprofit, and then others. And again, looks like we have a whole varying sizes of landholders across and even up and over the 1,000 acres. And we have people that are planning forestry projects here. Looks like, again, across the board, a lot of forest management plans, some harvesting, roads, timber cruising, forest taxes or estate planning, and then another. So appreciate everybody that came out and with us today and that filled out the poll. And I'm excited to have Alicia share more with us. So Alicia, back to you.
Thanks, Julie. So prior to starting on any project, you need to identify what your forest management team. Team members might include a banker. So if you're considering purchasing property or selling property, maybe you would be working with someone in the banking industry. You could have an accountant or tax preparer on your team. This is beneficial to find one who's familiar with forest management activities and related accounting purposes. An attorney. Again, finding someone who's familiar with land management so that they can properly represent you. Your ODF stewardship forester, these are the folks, the state agency that enforces the Oregon forest practice laws, and they can help interpret those laws for you as they relate to management decisions that you're making for your forest. And they're also a technical service provider. They'll provide site visits and advice for that. A consulting forester might be on your team. These folks offer a wide range of services, including administration and planning for timber harvests, planting trees, and vegetation management. They also offer timber cruising and appraisal or forest management plan writing, quite a wide suite of services that they might offer. You might work with a logging contractor. So in many cases, these folks offer a broad range of services as well, not just harvesting trees. And then forestry labor contractors, which is kind of all the catch-all for all of the different types of services that you might hire out for planting trees, applying herbicide, building and maintaining roads, those types of things. So I'd like to go over a couple of scenarios with you and try to just identify a couple situations where you will likely consider hiring one or more forestry professionals to help get the job done. So say, for example, you just bought a piece of property and harvest had been done, and now the reforestation responsibility is left up to you. So the trees need to be planted on that piece of ground. You might find that a consulting forester would be a good choice for you to work with, as they can handle all of the planning and administration for a project. So they can source the seedlings, arrange for their transportation to your site, coordinate with any of the tree planting contractors, inspect trees during the planting. They would follow up on the site to ensure that the trees are doing well over the next few years. They can handle any vegetation management needs that might be required before and or after planting. So that could be something like herbicide application or manual removal or control. They can take care of any proper paperwork that needs to be done, filed with the state, with the mills. And then they can also ensure that contractors get paid. So you work with a consulting forester to do to get these trees planted in the ground, or you might have a desire to take on the majority of these tasks and do the planning, administration, and follow up yourself. And so you might be doing the bulk of those things, and then you're working just with a reforestation contractor who might do your herbicide spraying and tree planting, and that's it. And you might be covering the rest of the things yourself. So a couple different options that you could go for in that type of scenario. Another situation you could find yourself in, maybe you're looking to salvage log an area that, as we all know, we've had a lot of might have been hit by wildfire, snow, or ice. So again, you can work with a consulting forester who can do all of the planning and administration for you. They can file the notification with the Oregon Department of Forestry, find the logger, mark trees, designate harvest unit boundaries. They would check in on the harvesting operation to make sure that it's meeting your specifications. And they can follow up on any road maintenance that may need to happen during, and after. And then, of course, arranging payment. Or maybe you want to be a little more hands-on and you might want to handle all of the steps for planning, administration, and follow-up. It kind of depends on how involved you want to be and how much time and money you're able to allocate towards a project. And then, of course, how knowledgeable and comfortable you are with taking on such a task. But maybe you handle the bulk of those things and work directly with the logger. The last example I'm going to give is one where you might need to work with several forestry professionals. So in this situation, say you have a family member who passes away and leaves a piece of property to you. Well, in order to inherit that property, you would need to have an appraisal done for tax purposes. So you would then work with a consulting forester to appraise the property. You would have an attorney represent you in the inheritance process, and then a CPA to ensure that your taxes are filed correctly. So as you can see, in some situations, it might be appropriate for you to do some of the work yourself. Of course, that if you're comfortable with the tasks at hand and you have that knowledge, time, and experience. However, there are certainly other situations where it's crucial that a trained professional handle the task in order for your objectives to be accomplished properly, safely, and within the law. Now, one thing I always like to remind folks is that when you're looking to hire any type of service provider, not just in forestry, but anything, you need to remember that you're the one that has the vision. So you have certain goals and you have a specific desire for your land. The people that you hire should understand your objectives and work with you to support those objectives and not just be working for their own agenda or unwilling to support your preferences. Of course, always have to keep in mind you must abide by all relevant laws and regulations, and you also always have to keep worker safety in mind at all times. But for example, say you're doing a 5-acre clear cut on a flat piece of ground and you want to retain all live mature hardwoods for wildlife habitat. It's important that your forestry team, so that could be your consulting forester, your logger, and your reforestation contractor. It's important that all these folks respect your preferences and they do their best to honor those. So of course, it always pops up that there's situations that arise where some of the hardwoods might need to be removed. You might not get to be able to keep every single one of them. Like if a merchantable conifer is hung up in one, that could cause a safety issue and that hardwood would probably need to come down. But the idea is that your team understands and respects your goals and objectives for managing your land, and they're going to do their best to honor your preferences. So after you've identified your team, you are then faced with the decision of who are you going to hire. But how do you know who to hire and who will be the best fit for your project or your land management needs? There are a lot of options out there, and some might be well advertised, others might not be so well advertised. A lot of forestry labor contractors get the bulk of their business through referrals, and they don't necessarily have a web presence. And in today's digital world, the phone book is becoming less and less relevant for finding businesses. So knowing how to find quality service providers that'll be a good fit for you and your land is really important. There are a variety of ways that you can approach finding help. So the first one is just a general internet search. Type in the name of the service provider or the type of service that you're looking for in your area and see what pops up. This is helpful if the company has a website, but like I mentioned, not all forestry service providers are going to have one. You can turn to the Oregon Forest Industry Directory. Now, this is an OSU maintained directory. It's free to use. The directory facilitates the establishment of business connections between the broad array of interests in Oregon's forestry sector. So for woodland owners like yourselves, it is really helpful for finding contact information for service providers like log buyers, non-timber forest product buyers, forestry consultants, and other forestry contractors. It's really easy to use, and you can search as broad as the entire state, your region, your county, and even down to your specific city. I often recommend when using this tool that folks search by the region that you're in or even the surrounding region, because forestry contractors often have a broad service area and they'll reach into several counties. So say, for example, you're located in Roseburg looking for a service provider. I would search in the Southwest region rather than just the city of Roseburg. You're going to yield more results that way. And then if you're at the edge of a region, you can search in the adjacent one as well. So if you're in Drain, which is the northern part of the Southwest region, you might want to search into the Willamette Valley as well as Southwest Oregon, just because you're kind of in that middle zone. It just widens your options for who you might be able to connect with. Now, word of mouth is always a great way to get referrals. Sometimes you'll even get advice on who to avoid working with as well, which can also be equally as important. If you are a member of the Oregon Smalllands Association or the Oregon Tree Farm System, you're already connected to a wide array of landowners in your area who can help you with references. So give a few trusted acquaintances or friends a call and see who they might recommend. You can also ask a local master woodland manager. These are volunteers for OSU Extension who often have experience with various forest management activities. You can connect with them through your local Extension forestry agent. Of course, your trusted forestry team of advisors might also be able to help. So talking to your consulting forester, logger, reforestation contractor. They often work with other forestry service providers and can give you recommendations of who they think might work well for your specific property, which is a benefit there, is they already know you and they know your property. Oregon Department of Forestry, your local stewardship forester, they might have a list of local service providers as well. Now, not all offices maintain such a list, and because they're a state agency, they're not allowed to recommend any specific company. Some ODF offices maintain as comprehensive of a list as they are able to, and they can provide that to landowners. Similarly, some OSU Extension forestry agents do the same thing as ODF does. Again, we can't refer you to any specific individual or company, but if we have a comprehensive list of a certain type of service provider, we're happy to provide that to you. Another way to find service providers is through professional associations and organizations. So this is really helpful because they provide lists of accredited service providers that are accredited through their professional organization. This mostly applies if you're looking for a professional logger, a consulting forester, engineer, or arborist. And each of these professional associations have certain qualifications that must be met before a person can be certified within that organization. They also have continuing education requirements in order for their members to be in good standing. So we often recommend that landowners work with forestry professionals who are certified by one of these organizations, if it's applicable to that field that you're looking to hire in. Additionally, if there are a lot of options out there, it can be assuring to reference one of these lists, as you know that the professionals listed in these directories stay up to date on current information, practices, and technology through those continuing education requirements. So if you're looking for a logger, the Association of Oregon Loggers, or AOL, their website is a great place to start. This website houses the Oregon Professional Logger, or OPL directory, which is a list of OPL certified logging operator companies. So this can include forestry professionals like loggers, of course, but it can also include road builders, cutters, log truckers, and other allied timber harvest contractors. There are two professional organizations that consulting foresters can be certified under. That's the Association of Consulting Foresters and the Society of American Foresters. Both ACF and SAF maintain a directory for all certified foresters in good standing with their professional organization. And both ACF and SAF have continuing education requirements, and their certifications are recognized nationwide. Oregon does not have a state requirement for the professional forester license, and which some states like California do. This can be a good place to turn if this is a certification that you'd like to ensure your consulting forester has. If you're looking to hire an arborist, the International Society of Arboriculture, or ISA, has a certification program for arborists. And they also maintain an online directory where you can search for ISA certified arborists in your area. The state of Oregon has a certification program for licensed forestry engineers and land surveyors. So if you're looking to hire a forestry engineer or land surveyor, you might consider hiring one who is a professional engineer, or PE, as they have rigorous standards for licensing and also require continuing education in order to maintain that license. Now, if you're looking to hire someone to apply herbicides on your property, you must hire someone who has an Oregon pesticide applicator license. You can go onto the Oregon Department of Agriculture's website and search for licensed applicators there. And to check if someone has any of these licenses that I've mentioned here on the screen, you can visit their respective websites of the appropriate accrediting organization. Oftentimes, some of these organizations will also issue a certification card that they might carry in their wallet. So you could ask to see that when you're meeting with contractors, but it can vary from organization to organization. So now that you've identified what type of forestry professional you need to hire, and you know where you can look to for references, the next piece of the puzzle is knowing what questions to ask to help narrow down your choices. So anytime you consider hiring a forestry professional, you'll want to call a couple of companies and ask them some standard questions before making your decision. It's like hiring any type of service provider. You want to make sure that who you pick is going to be the best for your specific situation, your goals, and your objectives. So for example, if you were building a house, you probably wouldn't hire the first contractor that you find online. You would do your research, you'd ask questions, ask for bids, and then make your decision after you've talked with a few and gotten a good feel for who would do the best job for you. The same goes with hiring a forestry professional. You want to talk with a few, invite them to see your property if that's relevant for their work. Wouldn't it be so relevant probably for someone like, a banker or an attorney? You would ask for bids and then pick the company who you think is going to do the best job. And don't ever discount that gut feeling that you might have either. That can be a very important part of the hiring process. Like I mentioned in the beginning, just remember that it's your property and the people you work with, your forestry team. They're there to support you in reaching your forest management goals. So it's important that you pick people that you think will do this well and who will respect your vision. So what questions should you ask potential forestry service providers? OSU Extension has compiled 5 short checklists that you can download and print at home, which we will link to as we go over them here in a minute. And these are going to help you with some guiding questions when hiring forestry professionals. We have these checklists to help you hire consulting foresters, logging contractors, tree planting contractors, chemical applicators, and accountants or tax preparers. So I'm now going to touch on a few key points that are covered in each of these publications. I would highly encourage you to download and print them as you need them, as they're a really good starting point. So if you're looking to hire any one of these types of service providers in the future, go online and download this checklist. The links will be posted on the Tree School online website. You can also find a recording of this presentation there afterwards. And then Dan is going to post links to these in the chat as I move through each of them. So a consulting forester. A consulting forester is a person who provides management services, including the development of management plans, marketing and administration of timber sales, forest management recommendations, and many other services. They act independent of forest product firms or logging companies, and they work with you to meet your goals while adhering to all relevant regulations. They have relationships with all of the service providers that a landowner might need. So log buyers, loggers, tree planters, herbicide applicators, etc. An experienced consulting forester can help generate better financial returns, enhance the long-term value of your forest, and help you attain your management objectives. So some questions that you might ask when you are looking to hire a consulting forester. You want to know, what are your qualifications? Ask if they have any professional certifications, such as with the Association of Consulting Foresters or Society of American Foresters. You'll want to ask, what services do you provide? And that's really to make sure that they have the experience and ability to accomplish what you need done for your land. Ask, how will you be charged? How will I be charged for your services? It could be a flat fee, or it could be a percentage of log sales income. It could be hourly or a daily rate. It really varies and depends on the job and the level of expertise that's required. Ask them if they'll do an initial consultation. Most of them walk the property with you to discuss your needs and to make sure that it's the right fit for both parties. Ask if they use a standard written contract. The best practice is to always have a contract with any service provider, as it protects both parties. And then also ask if they have appropriate insurance coverage. You want to make sure that you are financially protected if something were to go wrong during their contracted work. And last, references are something we recommend with all of these. So ask to speak with some prior clients who have similar properties and goals, and that can help you make your decision. Choosing a logging contractor is also a very important decision. They're actually on the ground, influencing the way that your forest develops into the future. So there are a lot of really key questions that you want to ask any potential logging contractors that you might work with. First off, you're going to find this is a pattern with all of these. What are your qualifications? So mistakes can be irreversible with this type of work. So you want to find a logger who's experienced with the type of work that needs to be done on your land. In Oregon, we advise that you look for someone who is certified through the Association of Oregon Loggers as an Oregon professional logger. You can ask, what services do you provide? Some might only do clear cutting, while others might be more experienced with thinning. Some might do both. Some may have different equipment availability for ground-based equipment versus yarding. There's a variety of mixes out there. No one logger is alike. So you need to know if the logger you're talking to can do the type of harvest that's best suited for your goals and your land, and also address any other project needs that might be related. So that would be things like road building and maintenance, splash treatment, erosion control, log sales, and more. Ask, how will I be charged for your services? So there can be several different answers. Generally, it's a percentage or a dollar per unit basis. Whatever the answer is, though, you must agree to it ahead of time. You should ask what is included in the logging price. It's important to know exactly what services will be delivered and when. Have that written in a contract. Ask if the logger will do all the work themselves or if some of it is going to be subcontracted. It's perfectly normal for a logger to subcontract some aspects of a harvest project. So know this ahead of time and know how the logger is going to manage those subcontractors. Ask if they have appropriate insurance coverage. If something were to go wrong during the logging operation, you want to make sure that you both are protected financially. They should have sufficient insurance coverage for property damage and liability, and that includes woods broad form liability, vehicle liability, and workers' compensation. You should ask to see certificates of these before you sign a contract. Ask them also, do you use the standard written contract? It's best to have a written contract. It's legally binding, protects both parties, avoid a handshake deal in these situations. And if you're thinning, ask how they will determine which trees to cut and how they're going to protect leave trees. You want to discuss and agree to these terms ahead of time and include any specific ways of doing so in your contract. Planting trees can be very expensive, so it's very important that this is done correctly from the start. You want to be confident that the tree planting contractor that you hire is going to do a good job and avoid mistakes that would cause any future planting failure. That's within their control, of course. You can't control for drought to a degree, some animal damage if in some situations. So, not accounting for those things, but making sure that they're doing everything that they can to make sure that your trees are going to survive. So here are some questions that you should ask a tree planting contractor. What are your qualifications? So how long have you been planting trees? Ask about the types of clients they normally work with, and of course, ask for references. How do you ensure that planters do quality work? This often entails hiring a foreman who will oversee the crew, but it's also very common for you, the landowner, or your consulting forester to inspect the operation while the trees are being planted. This way mistakes can be corrected immediately. You should ask what tasks will they perform? So there are a variety of things that they can assist you with, from ordering trees to picking them up, storing trees, also preparing the site, inspection, animal protection. All of these things should be discussed and spelled out in the contract ahead of time. How will I be charged for your services? Usually for planting trees, this is on a per acre basis, by the day or by the tree. And this would also be included in the contract. And then what we've been mentioning this whole time, should we develop a formal contract? Sometimes landowners might not bother with one if you have a very small job, just a couple acres, but the more details that you have, the larger the job, it's better off for both of you to have a contract in place. Chemical applicator. So like I mentioned, with all of these so far, Finding a chemical applicator that you trust is also very important. So you want to hire someone who has the right mix of knowledge, skill, equipment, and labor needed for the job. It's a really important step, and like tree planting, it can be very expensive if you have to do it more than once. Even worse, a poor chemical applicator can harm the environment or neighboring crops, and that creates issues there environmentally and also big liability issues for you, the landowner. So some questions to ask when hiring a chemical applicator. What are your qualifications? So you want to know that the person that you hire is qualified to do the job. Ask to see their commercial and or consulting applicator's license and proof of business insurance. And make sure that their level of insurance is appropriate for the job. You should ask about their forestry application experience. So have they worked for other forest landowners? If so, get some references. You can ask about their knowledge with the Oregon Department of Forestry forest practice rules for spraying near buffer zones, weather restrictions, record keeping, and using restricted herbicides. Also ask if they are up to date on EPA worker protection standards. And check if their license and experience allows them to develop spray prescriptions, which you might be looking for them to do when applying chemical on your property. Ask them what services they provide specifically. So you want to make sure that you both are clear on what needs to be done, so you both can ensure that the operator has the knowledge, equipment, and staff that's needed for that job. And ask how the work will be done. So ask about the experience of the crew, what photos or maps they might need from you ahead of time. Ensure that they provide you with records of the job in a timely manner, and that they're going to finish within the agreed upon desired time frame. And then of course you want to know how are you going to be charged for their services. It could be by the job, by the acre, or costs could be itemized. So spell it all out in a contract ahead of time and get a written estimate. Our last checklist of these 5 checklist publications I am referring to here is for accountants hiring accountants and tax preparers. So some of this decision when you're hiring these folks can be based on personality and who you get along with, but there are definitely some key considerations that you need to take into account before you hire anyone. Some of the questions you might ask are, what are your qualifications, of course? So qualifications could include a degree in accounting, possibly in taxation or a law degree. And are they certified by a licensing body or the IRS? So in the state of Oregon, it is required that paid preparers be either a CPA, an LTC, LTP, or attorney. You want to ask, what services do you provide? Not all tax return preparers perform everyday accounting functions. So determine your needs before you select someone to work with. Ask what percentage of their clients have forest land. This is a really big one because you want someone who's familiar with forest operations and finance. Ask about their experience with other landowners and with properties of similar size. It's also important to know if they have experience filing returns with timber sales, reforestation, and casualty losses, if those are issues that you're facing. You'll want to know how you will be charged for the services. There can be several different answers for this, but you need to determine upfront if it's going to be by the hour or by the form, or if phone calls are included in the service fee. You'll want to ask, how do you handle issues that you're unfamiliar with? So it's possible you might not find someone who has a lot of forest operations experience. This question can help you understand how they can best serve you and make sure that they're doing the best job for you. So if they don't know the answer to something, are they going to research it, ask a colleague, be willing to attend a training, get clarification on that. Ask about if they are conservative or aggressive with gray tax matters. So finding someone who matches how aggressive you're willing to be on these issues is very important. Ask if they will represent you if you are audited, because if you're audited, you might want a tax return preparer available to explain how the process goes and to defend your interpretation of a specific code section. And then last, ask if they're available for consultation throughout the year. Having access to someone year-round might help you plan transactions with tax implications in mind. So as you can see, each of these publications follows a similar format and provides you with some guiding questions to help make your decision. And again, Dan posted those in our chat, and they'll be online as well. So once you've determined who you're going to hire, you now need to decide if a contract is necessary. So in most situations, as we've talked about a few times now, it's a wise decision to have a contract, as it covers both parties and is in everyone's best interest. OSU Extension has a publication called Contracts for Woodland Owners, which provides you with important information to consider when creating a contract with a forestry service provider. Again, Dan's going to link to this in the chat, but it'll also be available on the Tree School online website. Perhaps one of the most useful things about this publication is that it provides 8 different sample contracts for different forestry activities that you might hire someone to complete on your property. Of course, these are just examples, and there are many versions of similar contracts out there. Your forestry service providers will likely have a standard contract that they use. Just be sure to review them carefully and make sure that you know exactly what you are signing. So that concludes my section for now. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Eric, who's going to share some more information on contracts and give practical advice on working with forestry professionals.
All right, thanks, Alicia. It was a very thorough presentation on how to find great forestry contractors. I'm going to share. Quick, all right. Okay, so thanks again. I'm Eric Farm. I wanted to take a quick
Hey,
little.
Eric, we
Yes.
are seeing your screen and not the presentation, so might want to try that again.
Yeah.
You have a lot of icons.
Yes, sir. All right, let's try that again. How about, how's that?
There we go.
Okay.
Looks good.
Great. Thanks, Julie. So I wanted to quickly take a little bit of time to jump back on professional accreditations. I think most of us have seen how a CPA or MD, they know what those mean after somebody's name, but forestry has a few of those too that you should probably recognize. As you can see, like Julie mentioned, I've got 2 of those, PE for professional engineer and ACF for full member of the Association of Consulting Foresters. There's a few more out there that you should probably keep an eye out for. Alicia mentioned a few of them, the CF for consultant or certified forester. Another one's a CWB, certified wildlife biologist. So those are things that you may see after people's names as you're researching, and that should help you have a little bit of confidence that they have some experience and background that may be useful in your next project. Like we talked about too, the state pesticide applicator license is another one. That one doesn't have a bunch of letters that go after your name, but that's an important license to have as well if you're going to be doing those projects. The accreditations are a way to certify to people that you have a certain education, experience, and expertise specific to a discipline. And I think Alicia also mentioned they require continuing education. So you know that that person is staying up to date on technology and laws. So you're going to get a great service. And one of the most important things I think is that all of them have their practitioners subscribe to a code of ethics. So you as a landowner, as a client, are assured that they have subscribed to a higher level of standard, not just the legal minimums, but a higher level than that. There's almost always a complaint process, so you're able to excuse me, if you run into a problem, they turned into a bad apple, you have a way to go back to that certification body and file a formal complaint. And the fact that they have to be renewed periodically doesn't allow somebody to get too far out if they're not working appropriately. So I would recommend that when you're looking for your professionals, look for these certifications. One thing to note, in Oregon, the professional logger certification is done at the company level, so it's not a personal certification, but most highly reputable logging contractors are going to have that. So Alicia kind of ended. I'm going to pick up where she left off. You've selected your great contractor. Contracting is going to be your next step. For a lot of people, contracts can be a bit overwhelming, especially if you don't read them very often. One advantage to having an attorney or a consulting forester on your professional team is that they do read and prepare contracts regularly and can recommend a good template that can be used for your project. So rather than having to create something from scratch, they've probably got something that would work for you. And as Alicia also mentioned, the pamphlet that is going to be available, Contracts for Woodland Owners, it's a really comprehensive pamphlet. Let's see, there's kind of the cover of it. It's comprehensive. It has sort of outlines for all of the elements that need to be in your contract and also some example language. So I think everybody knows your contract needs to be signed by both parties. One thing to remember is if you have any changes after the contracts are signed, you might add a piece to the project, or a price has changed. You really need to make sure that those changes get captured in writing and signed as an amendment to the contract. If you're flipping through the pamphlet, pages 5 through 7 are those elements that really need to be addressed in your contract. They're all super important. I'll highlight a few that I think are noteworthy. The first one's project boundaries and how those are going to be marked on the ground. So you need to make sure that it's really clear where you want the work done and where not. And if they get outside of those boundaries, there's going to be an issue. Or if they don't treat the entire area, that's also going to be an issue. Log accounting or rock accountability. So if they're doing either one of those, you need to have load tickets and branding hammers. You need to figure out how you're going to track that and incorporate that into your contract. There's the log accounting and the payment terms. So, what day are you going to get paid on? If you're selling logs, you get paid from the mill on a certain day. So you probably need to make the payday after that for your logger. Those payments can be based on tons, loads, board feet, gross scale, net scale. There's a lot of different versions of that. And so you need to make sure that's really clear and that both parties know what that payment's going to be based on. You don't want any big surprises if one person thinks it's going to be based on loads and another one thinks it's on net scale. Detailed specifications on how the contract compliance is going to be measured. So if there's anything, any real detailed specifications, they need to be outlined in the contract. Performance guarantees or holdbacks. A lot of times you'll retain 5% of what would be paid to the logger as sort of a performance guarantee. And there needs to be some discussion in the contract about how you're going to refund that. What are the scenario, or what does the project need to look like to get full release of that holdback money? We talked about insurance requirements earlier. A couple of things to make sure they're included in your insurance language is additional insured, uh, incorporating that so that you become a party to their insurance policy. That gives you an extra level of protection that their insurance is going to cover you if something goes sideways. And then they should be able to provide insurance certificates to show that their insurance is complete and names you. There's should be talk in there also about how they're going to follow, that they're required to follow the Forest Practices Act. A lot of them say the Forest Practices Act and all other state and federal laws. So that's pretty encompassing, but says that they're going to follow all the rules when they're doing your project. One thing, it's not real unusual to have some sort of either small, hopefully it's just small, but oil spills. So having some provision in there about what needs to happen if an oil spill happens on your property. You don't want to have any liability for that going forward. Damage to adjacent timber or reprod. So there should be some provision in there for how much, if there's any allowed, or what would happen if there was damage. Who's responsible for road maintenance? That's a big one. It can be very expensive, and so making sure that whether or not the landowner is going to take care of road maintenance, or if the logging contractor is going to be responsible for road maintenance during the operation, and then also bringing that road back up to the pre-haul condition after operations are complete. Sometimes slash disposal, reforestation are all incorporated in there too, to make sure that it's clear which party is going to be responsible for that. Another piece that would be good to have in there is some language about suspending operations due to weather. So we have, this time of the year it's bad weather, but in the summertime it can be too hot, too dry. And so you need to have some ability to say, okay, we're going to suspend operations right now due to the weather. Also being able to, for a non-compliance of the contract, having a way to be able to say, we need to take a timeout and assess things here. And then a lot of the rest is kind of boilerplate. I call boilerplate language. There's the venue, attorney fees, dispute resolution. More and more there's language that says, first choice is mediation, then arbitration, and then court, to try and minimize legal expenses if there's a problem. So the pamphlet goes into lots of detail on those, and so I think those are all look real good. A few requirements that you probably won't find in a forestry contract. A requirement to be licensed and bonded. So that's kind of a construction term. I've seen it before that people have wanted their forestry contractors to be licensed and bonded. That's pretty unusual. And so typically using your professional accreditations and your insurance is going to be your protection, along with the holdback, the performance holdbacks. Another one is surety bonds. Those are pretty hard to get. And so that holdback, that performance holdback, is a much more common way to ensure that there's a little bit of funds if some of the maintenance isn't done or some cleanup project isn't completed. So, and not only are they protecting, our contracts protecting both parties in the event of a problem, but they're also a good way to communicate your expectations and responsibilities. And so it's real clear, everybody understands what their role is and what the expectation is going to be. So to me, they're kind of, they're starting to get thicker and thicker. They're all 15 or 20 pages now, but pretty important as you're getting ready to start your project. So once your project starts, you've got the next step is going to be your contract administration or project management, quality control. This phase is going to be super important that there's really good communication between you and your contractors. You really can't anticipate all the things that are going to happen when you're doing your contract. And so you need to be ready to adjust your plan. And really the only way to do that is through real good communication. Regular communication is going to avoid surprises, and you'll be able to make those adjustments early on when hopefully it's not too disruptful, and everybody can kind of replan or make a new plan. Regular site visits are a good idea to make sure that everything's going the way you expect it to. Again, like Alicia mentioned, it's your project, it's your goals, and it should be looking the way you anticipated it would. One thing I would note is too many site visits is going to slow your contractor down and potentially increase the costs. So I would try and measure that. Don't get too if you're there all day, every day, and trying to ask questions all day, that's going to really slow things down. But if you're stopping in the morning and afternoon, or periodically and checking on things and seeing if they have any questions, I think that's very reasonable. Another thing, kind of back to the plan's going to change. A good thing to remember is in forestry, almost everything that we do is based off of a statistical sample or an estimate. So it's almost impossible to count every single tree or to measure everything exactly. And so you're having to make an estimate, and depending on how optimistic or conservative those estimates are is going to determine how close you are to your result. And so, don't be surprised if what turns out is a little bit different than what your contractor quoted or their estimate at the beginning of the project, but it shouldn't be way out of line. It should be somewhat reasonable. One thing, another item, my experience has been that fixed price contracts that are bid or fixed up front, the one thing to watch out for there is that typically your contractor is going to have to build a lot of cushion into that price to make sure that they don't end up losing money on the project. And so there are times when that's necessary. Maybe you have a very specific budget, or it's a real unknown how long it's going to take. So it might be necessary, but my experience has been setting a price that's based on a rate, a day cost, an actual time of materials is a better way to get the best price you can. And so this method is going to require more project oversight. You need to be pretty actively engaged, but it allows your contractor to cover their costs without having to add a lot of extra cushion in there to make sure that it doesn't go sideways. So here's a plug, a shameless plug, I guess, for a consulting forester. Our business is really to help landowners know what's reasonable and what's not, and to find the right balance of revenue and expense to meet your goals. And so I'd encourage folks to, especially if you're starting your first projects, to engage and add a forestry consultant to your professional team. We've worked with some clients that are hoping to gain enough experience where we won't be necessary. And so we're helping them learn how to do these projects and manage them themselves. And for small ownerships, that's, you can't have a lot of extra cost. And so the cost of a consulting forester in the beginning is helping them to be able to sort of do this on their own in the long run. So that's fun. It's fun to have people that are learning and give them the tools they need to be able to do a lot of this on their own. So a few things, these are all things we've learned the hard way, some pitfalls and watch out situations. I'll say they're not total deal killers, but you do need to be extra careful if you see any of these. So they may, you should be getting, your antenna should be up if any of these come up. So it may be the wrong type of contractor. So there are a number of contractors that can provide a wide range of services. Some may do logging and road building, but you may find that you need a specialist in one of those two areas, and trying to ask one to do the other is not going to turn out very well. Another situation would be, we run into very small projects that may be, is it logging or is it a tree service situation? And so if you don't have the right contractor in there, things may go a little sideways. So make sure you've got the correct contractor. If your contractor doesn't have insurance, that would be a big red flag. That one might not be a watch out. That might be a runaway. But very old or poorly maintained equipment. So if you have a highly reputable contractor, they should be taking pride in their equipment. They should be working steady and have a revenue stream that allows them to keep their equipment maintained. The other part on that is you end up having less catastrophic breakdowns. Those sometimes have oil spills with them and cause downtime that are going to increase the cost or prolong your project longer than you were hoping for. So that's something to take a look at. A bad reputation with your trusted professional team, friends or neighbors. So, a lot of your fellow landowners have used, the forest industry is not huge. And so getting their feedback, it may not be, they may have had a bad experience, but getting their feedback is going to be real important. Not being licensed or accredited with their industry association. So we've kind of hammered on this a lot. That is something that you can look to, that you're hiring somebody, that's sort of subscribing to the highest standards. And so that would be something that should be high on your list. And if not, then hopefully that is being ranked appropriately. There, one word of caution there, though, is not all industries are licensed or accredited. So road builders typically don't get professional logging certified. Some do, but that's not a requirement for them. Similarly, tree planting contractors, there isn't really an accreditation for that. And a lot of those same companies do pre-commercial thinning. They would need to be licensed if that same company is doing herbicide treatments. So that there may be some kind of parallel there, that they are licensed that way. Another sort of, be careful, you should be a little skeptical, unsolicited calls, letters, or knocks on the door. So if you aren't asking and reaching out to your contractor, or somebody's coming to your door, I would be a little suspicious of that. They may be trying to take advantage of somebody who doesn't know what they have. So that would be a time, maybe it's a good opportunity. Maybe it's a neighbor that is going to be logging right next door and wants to coordinate with you, but you really need to make sure that your professional team is involved and everybody knows, and it's part of your planned projects. It's not something that you get pressured into. It sounds like, unfortunately, due to the fires that happened last summer, that some of this has already started going on. And so if you're in some of those affected areas, be very careful about some of these sort of unsolicited engagements. And then let's see, payment as a percentage of log sales. So for a long time, that was a way that logging contractors would work. They'd say, well, we'll do it for 50% of the log sales and or some percentage. And the thing that I would caution everybody, this is not a deal killer for sure, but know that the cost of logging is not related to the value of logs. And so as long as the percentage is set right, it works okay. But like right now, the log prices are very high, and that you may end up overpaying for logging services compared to what that cost should cost you. So if that's how you're planning on paying as a percentage of the log sales, make sure that you understand or somebody's helping you calculate what that would be paid on a truckload or on a per thousand board feet rate, and make sure that's reasonable before you set that percentage. And I guess my last piece of advice is really to hire the best contractor that you can. They may not be the cheapest, but expect the highest quality results from them. Your projects are going to be on such long cycles that if you get a bad contractor to your property, you may have to live with the problems that they created for many years. And so to me, sort of finding and hiring the best contractor that you can is going to end up with, more likely to end up with the best results and meeting your goals. So I think we're going to have time for some questions, but my contact information's up here. If anybody wants to discuss anything offline, I'd be happy to talk about any specifics with you later on. So with that, I'll turn
Well,
it over to you, Julie.
thanks, Eric. Those are some great insights and things for people to think about that are doing a variety of different forestry projects coming up. I don't see any questions in yet. So this is what I'm going to encourage everyone to get those questions in to Eric and Alicia. I think, if you have scenarios, if you have things that you're looking for, resources, anything that about hiring the right forestry professionals, feel free to pop in the Q&A box. We'll go ahead and launch the poll. This is just our wrap-up poll about today. So I'll also put that up as maybe people are entering some questions. And then also let you know the next webinar is coming up. Eric, if we can share that one, the next slide. So coming up soon is the Carbon in Oregon's Managed Forest on March 16th. Mike Clousey, Dr. Edie Stoney Hall, and David Ford are going to talk about, again, carbon in Oregon's managed forest. So join that conversation. And then our East Side companions, I think the next slide, Eric, is for Eastern Oregon, is doing a series of also similar to Tree School Online, but we're also doing they're also doing one, and the next one is on identification and management of Eastern Oregon hardwoods. And so Thomas Stokely is going to be the next up in that series. And so they have a series going on as well. And you can register for both of those on the Trees of Known Oregon website. Again, these resources that were shared today, those will be on, you can get to those resources to the Know Your Oregon or Know Your Forest website. You can also go to the one here through the OSU if you registered that way. So a lot of different ways to get to those resources, and hopefully they'll help you in the future as you look to do some of that work on your property. So I'll also ask Alicia to come back and join us. And Eric, if you're going to stop share, we can encourage everybody to maybe if anyone has any questions. So maybe sometimes, Alicia, you talked about in the beginning about when do we know when to hire, call an OSU extension, or when to maybe hire a consulting forester. Could you maybe, Alicia, talk a little bit about examples of when we know, or if it's all right if you call OSU, because they're just going to tell you they can't do that. So maybe any examples of when we often see that scenario.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'll often hear from landowners that, you know, they just bought a piece of property and they don't really know what to do with it or have some ideas, but kind of want to get some advice. And so often turning to extension in those kind of scenarios, turning to extension first is a great route to go. We can go out and do a site visit if we can't get all those questions answered over the phone or through email, and we can kind of help walk the landowner through, you know, what resources are available, what type of service provider might be appropriate after visiting the property and kind of getting a feel for what they want to do with it. And we'll be able to help kind of the landowner hone into the direction that they might want to go. One of the clear distinctions we always like to make between OSU Extension and a consulting forester is that OSU Extension isn't providing any sort of prescriptions or, you know, advising on this is what you should do for your land. We are providing landowners with, here's all the options that you have that we can see, giving you all of the tools so that you can make an informed decision moving forward. And oftentimes that will be the landowner deciding that, yep, for this situation, I think it's smart for me to call a consulting forester or maybe call a logger directly, you know, kind of take it into their own hands from there. So we're happy to take those calls. And, you know, if you don't really know who is the right service provider for you to work with, you know, you want to do something, but you don't really know who you need to work with or what those steps might be, you can call your local extension forestry agent. You can go onto the extension website and find who that might be. And that person can help point you in the right direction, connect you with any lists that might be available, and help you get on the right way to accomplishing your goals.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about that. And I'd also, you know, we've shared some great resources today. The other one that is also on the website and a lot available online and at a lot of the extension offices is a resource called the Family Forest Resource Guide. And it has a little bit of all the who's who in the forestry sector, and it lists a lot of these groups, and it's just a kind of all in one spot. So it's another great resource to take a look at if you're looking for who is it that you might need to contact. So our question here from Shannon says, any specific advice as to thinning versus clear cut, small acreage under 50 acres, mixed species, mixed sizes? I'm guessing that's going to end up being it depends, but does either one of you want to give her any idea of where she might get started, or, you know, you would suggest that they might get started on a kind of making that decision?
Sure, I can take that one. The big difference on thinning, especially on the west side, if it's more of a Douglas fir site, is going to be making sure you know how you're going to identify the trees that are going to be cut, so you get it to the density you like, and what the residual damage. How are you going to prevent the residual damage? And so, if you get bark that comes off the trees, that's going to be a problem for your future, you know, the remaining trees. It's going to cause rot. It may decrease the value. And so those are a couple of things that are big differences between thinning and clear cutting that you need to think about in your planning process.
Yeah, definitely. And I would also just put in there, I think that's also a really key part of putting together a forest management plan, is putting together that plan and looking at the stands and thinking about the long term, you know, what your objectives and goals are long term, and which one of those thinning or clear cut will help get you there, since it takes so long to grow. So the next one is, as newer forest owners with a forest management plan, yay, what is the first best provider to hire? Is it a consulting forester who can establish a working relationship with for future variety of projects and tasks? So, you know, I don't know, Alicia, you want to comment about forest management plan, kind of what's the next best, and then maybe Eric, you can add in there. I think there's certainly, you guys talked about a whole array of a team there, so I think you both have good probably insight into that one.
Yeah, so first of all, congratulations on having a forest management plan as new owners. That's a big to do. So great job there. The answer, if you stick around Extension and attend enough of our classes and talk to us enough, you're going to hear this "it depends" answer a lot. Julie already said it once. I'm going to say it again, so it won't be the last time you hear it. But it really does depend on, what exactly does your property look like? What type of forest composition? What are your goals and objectives? How big is it? All sorts of factors play into who might be a great kind of first step. Your consulting forester, that if you have, and Eric can speak to this, but if you have a property that that you might have enough activity or potential activity, or it's of large enough size where it makes financial sense, the consulting forester is likely a really great relationship to establish. But I'd also encourage you to reach out to your local extension forester and get on their mailing list. That way you can kind of stay in tune with, what might be relevant going on locally, that they're in tune with and they're hearing about. You'll be hearing about classes and different things that come their way. Through there, once we are finally in a non or less COVID world and we can have in-person things like field trips, those are awesome opportunities to connect with other landowners as well. All of these, you're going to find that it's not just one person that you'll want to establish a relationship with, but your forestry team, like we've been talking about, it's pretty big once you start kind of diving in. So one other person that might be a good choice, especially if you have some different operations in mind for the future, like a reforestation or a logging project, is connecting with your Oregon Department of Forestry stewardship forester. Inviting them out for a site visit and talking with them about what they're seeing and what type of advice they may have. So, Eric, do you have anything to add on to that?
I just throw in that depending on what the scope and scale of your plan is, if you were to engage a consulting forester, our job is to try and put you in contact with the resources you need, and so that's probably a good, probably a selfish advice, but that's our job. That's what we're here for, is to help landowners get the right tools and resources. And so, sort of like a general contractor, we don't actually do the logging, we don't actually do the road building, but we have a network of contractors that we can recommend that would fit whatever the next planned activity would be. So, and I'm not sure, we saw it in the first poll, but a lot of people's next project is actually a forest management plan. And so, maybe just quickly, there is grant money available to help you with those projects. The Department of Forestry has grants that can help offset the cost of preparing those. And that is something where you may be able to engage with a consulting forester and kind of come up with what that plan is. So it seemed like there was a fair number of people that was going to be their next step. So really important. It really is a good roadmap for what your plan is for your property.
And I'll put a quick plug on that forest management plan. I know we're diverging from the original question, but it's always good to bring up because it's very relevant. On the OSU Extension has a great template that all of the partners in forestry education have contributed to and approved. And so we have a website with all the resources that you would need to help you fill out this forest management plan template. There's actually a guidebook that can walk you through every single section that you would need to fill out. So you can do that independently. Like Eric mentioned, you can work with a consulting forester and maybe even get some of those cost share funds through Oregon Department of Forestry. That's a great way to go about. And I think that there's also, Julie, you can tell me if there's a tree school online class, I think,
There
on forest
is.
planning. So
Yeah, Lauren and Ryan Lauren and Ryan did one last year, and so it's in the archives. You can go back and watch on forest management planning. Alicia, as a follow-up, we had another question that came in. If you could elaborate a little more on what's the difference between the stewardship forester versus an OSU extension forester?
Yeah, that's a great question. So an OSU extension forester, our main role is education and outreach. And that's really for a variety of audiences, but our primary audience that we work with are small woodland owners. So we will provide classes and workshops. We will do site visits and help arm landowners with all of the different informational and educational tools that you need to do whatever you're looking to do on your property. So we are education and outreach. Our Oregon Department of Forestry stewardship foresters, they are your technical service provider for your area. They are the enforcer for our Oregon forest practice laws, and they're the person that you would work with directly for any sort of operation that you might be conducting on your property. So a timber harvest, a spray project, filing notifications for those things, making sure that you're meeting all of the rule requirements for Oregon. So they're more authoritative, regulatory, and we are more, extension is more informational, educational.
Thanks. Yep, I think that's a great overview on that. And then one more question, kind of about getting a forester. So how have the fires affected getting a forester and other professionals needed to salvage log? And I guess, I think in probably the bigger picture about just sometimes there's maybe hard to find those professionals because there's been a lot of demand for their time. So maybe if you guys want to address that question about if you're having a hard time finding that forester or other professionals, any ideas for that, or what are you seeing with that availability?
Jump in on that one. So it is a little bit sign of the times. There's the number of contractors, foresters, logging contractors, truck drivers, forestry labor contractors. That really has started to compact over the years. And so the most important thing I can recommend is trying to have your plan and to communicate early so that you can get into a schedule with the contractor that you select. They're busy. Most of these guys are busy year round. They're not waiting around and gonna give you a great deal because they've been sitting around for 3 months. So if you can get into their schedule, you have the best opportunity of getting the best contractor. And because most projects are sort of seasonal, right? If you don't have rock roads, you're going to log in the summertime. The herbicide treatments all happen during different points in the year. So that's, early coordination is going to be the key there. With the salvage logging that's going on and the fires, that's really put a real cramp on the number of logging contractors, especially. The bigger timber companies are really focused on getting as much of that wood salvaged as they can. And so it just kind of puts a real emphasis on making sure that you're coordinating out as far as you can. If you're able to work with a forester, they may be able to use their where they can kind of bundle projects together to give you a little bit higher priority. So that's one thing we like to provide is our relationships with some of these contractors. We can say, well, we've got one more little project to add on to another project, and they are able to just fit that in and take care of it. So lean on your team. Your accountant might even have the ability to, if they've got contacts with some of these contractors, to be able to help give you a little bit of priority too. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think the other thing that is sometimes beneficial too is Alicia mentioned those small woodland owners are the association groups, like Oregon Smalllands Association and your local county meetings. And that might also be an opportunity to talk with neighbors and find out, who's there locally in the area, and not only get resources, but just and references, but just who might be available and who's having other work done, like you said, Eric. I was also thinking on a follow-up of that, it might be a good opportunity for us to also just mention about seedling availability, because with the fires, that might, really impact. And so, I don't, Alicia, if you want to maybe mention about kind of what OSU's looking at that, and especially if you're looking like you need seedlings from the fire, if you want to just talk briefly about, if people are planning to harvest, I think that's just really making sure that people are thinking about long-term and getting those seedlings ordered.
Yeah, so prior to the 2020 wildfires, it had been pretty tough for landowners to get a hold of seedlings anyway, without, on a short notice. That 1 to 2 year ordering ahead of timeline was very important for small woodland owners. That has become even more important now, since we have so many acres to reforest in Oregon. So what OSU Extension is working alongside several different partners in the state, including Small Woodlands Association, the Forest Service, ODF, to first they're doing a survey, and that survey is active right now. So if you did have property burn in the 2020 wildfires, get in touch with me and I'll connect you with that survey. But we're trying to assess the need for what reforestation needs are from the fires right now. And then ODF is working on a plan to get that seed started, grown into seedlings, and available at a fair market price to fire affected landowners. So it's going to be a couple years, obviously, before those seedlings are available, because the trees need to grow. They're not in the ground. The seed hasn't been planted yet. But this is a cooperative effort, with the idea that, all those private lands will have seedlings available within the next few years so that they can be reforested. So if your property wasn't affected by the wildfire or by any wildfires, and you're still, moving along with normal forest management planning and activities, and you have a reforestation need coming up that you're aware of, we definitely recommend getting that seedling order in as soon as you can, as soon as you're aware, just to make sure that you're not going to run into any seedling availability issues and issues that would come from that later on down the line.
Thanks, Alicia. So another question came in on, what if I can't find a contractor because I don't have a lot of acres? And we didn't specify what type of contractor in that, but I don't know, Eric, to me, that's a great case for consulting forester, because they might be able to add those in, if depending on what activity they're looking to do, add them in with other, entities happening in the area. So do you have any other thoughts on that question about sometimes those smaller acres are maybe more challenging to find availability?
That you kind of hit the nail on the head. It could be hard, and it can definitely not be very cheap. And so, I kind of warn people, if you're operating at that really small scale, that could be, a large city lot, or maybe even below 3 to 5 acres, it may be a cost, it may be an expense to you. So rather than looking at it as a forestry project that I'm going to cut trees and I'm going to make some money doing that, it may be something that you're kind of that tree service type project, where you're going to have to hire somebody to come take them down, and it's not going to necessarily return very much money, but it may be a fire resiliency project, or something like that that's important. So yeah, talking with a consultant near you would be, they may be able to package that, like you say. And so they might have a half a day on a project somewhere else, and they're able to, on their way by one day, do that treatment for you. So talking to your neighbors, you may be able to coordinate with somebody else that's working on a project like that around you, and be able to bundle it and make it into a project that's big enough. So that would be probably the first step.
And sometimes too, with that, if you're not, it just doesn't pan out where You're going to be able to, work with a consultant or bundle with a neighbor or something like that. And you are able to get somebody, to fall the trees. It's possible that, instead of looking to, go the traditional route and sell those trees to a mill, you might consider kind of more creative avenues for dealing with that wood. So you might bring on a portable sawmill operator, and now you're looking at, lumber for a new shed that you were looking to build, or, work with a neighbor who might be looking to do the same thing, and maybe you can work with them to cut a deal there and help with your costs. So there's definitely room to be creative with those types of things. In some areas, there might be really small specialty mills if you have desirable species. Like in my area in Douglas County, like if you have oak of a certain size, that might be a product that you can only have a few trees, but a small mill might be interested in purchasing. So there are those types of situations, and you can talk with your forestry team, your a consulting forester. Might not end up working with them, but they might have some ideas. Talk with them, talk with neighbors, your extension forester.
Thanks. And there's also soil and water conservation districts might be another good opportunity too, and for some of those smaller acreage to connect with. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We have a few more questions in. We're going to continue answering for just a few more minutes. If you'd like to add in any more questions for Alicia or Eric, feel free to send those in. Just again, thanks to everyone for joining, and feel free to hang with us for a few more minutes as we finish up the last few questions. But I want to thank Eric and Alicia too for your time today and for all your insights and information, and both of you being willing to have follow-up calls and emails as well. So one of them, maybe Eric, this will be for you. Another question is, what is a ballpark estimate for a consultant to evaluate a 20-year-old stand of Douglas fir on 15 acres? And I think the key word in there is evaluate, and that can probably have many meanings. So we, likely you can't give out a price tag, but what are some things, maybe steps they would take if they're asking for that to be done?
Sure. So that's a great one. I think I'm going to use your guys's it depends answer. So yeah, evaluate could be a few different things. One would be, I just purchased this property, and what should I do with it? And that may just be a quick visit, a few hours. Like Alicia, I think, mentioned, a lot of times we'll come out and do an initial consultation for free. But for 15 acres of younger Doug fir forest, it's going to be a part of a day to really be able to get a good look at that. So if evaluate is more of a valuation, it's a assessment of the value. We may have to do some more measurements to get an accurate assessment on the value of the timber. But it's still a small enough project that you're going to take a sample, and it's going to be a less than a day project on the ground. You may have some more work in the office. So it's a pretty reasonable project. I would say, don't hold me to this, but less than $1,000, you're going to get probably a pretty good assessment of what you have. If you really are just looking for, what do I have? What should I do next? You might be able to do that in your initial consultation. That might be complimentary.
Thanks, Eric. So this was about any professionals to think about as far as wildlife displacement. And so I'm just kind of taking a guess here, maybe if the channel wants to give us any clarification on that, but maybe we haven't talked a lot about the wildlife biologists, but there's certainly professionals that if habitat or wildlife both as a problem, or if you're trying to enhance, we have a whole wildlife and managed forest program at OFRI that we try and always help people think about how to balance, their forestry goals along with wildlife. And there's certainly a lot of professionals out there around, certified biologists that could come out and also, much like forestry, help them think about, what their wildlife. And so, I don't know, Alicia, if you have any additional ideas with that question.
I would 100% with what you said there. And I think the only thing I would add maybe is your local Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife might have some information if you're just looking for resources, not necessarily looking, for someone to come do a site visit and work with you on a certain plan or anything like that. But ODF&W is always a really great resource. They're, that's what they do. So it doesn't hurt to give them a call either.
And I'd
Great.
throw in
Eric?
there that if that's one of your land management goals, to make sure that that's part of your forest management plan, because you can really tailor your forest management plan to either minimize displacement or spatially you move around those harvest units so that there's always some place for the species of concern to move to.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot that can be done thinking about those. And maybe even if it's your, of an interest and you put together a wildlife habitat plan, you could even have surveys and different things done to help evaluate what's out there on the property currently or what's the future conditions might be. So I think that's the end that I see of questions. Really appreciate everyone's time. Thanks, Dan, for helping in the background today. And thanks a lot to Eric and Alicia for your time putting everything together. And hope folks got some great information today, some good insights, and some hopefully a lot of tips as they move into their next projects. And looking forward to next conversations. Join us again for the next Tree School Online. So thanks to everybody for enjoying the rest of your afternoon.